Hey buddies, Miss Puggy here coming at you with another Borderlands 3 video. Today we're covering Zane's new skill tree and his new action skill. Mantis does an excellent job of killing anything really quickly. It's a pretty brain dead action skill. You just point and click and it kills anything. Unless you're fighting an enemy that has tons and tons of health. Most enemies will instantly die. Like most badass enemies that I've hit the crit spot in will kill instantly as long as you're using this particular setup to boost critical hit damage as much as possible. Because this build focuses on the new skill tree, let's get right into the new skill tree and explain what action skill points we're using and why this tree is so amazing. So right off the bat, the Mantis shoulder cannon does 1.5 million damage per shot, at least for the setup I'm using, and that's a crazy amount of damage for just one action skill ability that you can use every 2 seconds. Your cooldown comes back so quickly with this that you can use it so many times. It's a very easy action skill setup for Zane here. The two augments that we're using is Brain Drain. What we're trying to do with the build is try to get critical hits, so we're putting as many of our chips into critical hits. So this critical hit kill will give us our charges back. That would just allow you to keep rapidly firing Mantis Cannon. And then we use this one, which increases the amount of charges and makes the cannon deal 20% more damage, which is absolutely huge. Other important abilities here would be the Headsman's Hand, which increases our critical hit damage. And since we're using a Seeing Dead, we get our kill skills really quickly and get bonus effects for all our kill skills. We're also, of course, using Seeing Red, so we can, every time we use our Mantis gun, or clone in this case, since we're also running clone, we'll get 25% increase and a bunch of other increases as well, but we're focusing on that. This stacks twice, so we get a 50% more critical hit damage, which is absolutely huge if you hit them correctly. We get this, which also increases our cooldown rate, which allows us to constantly fire our Mantis Cannon, and this ability as well, which increases our cooldown rate as well. Lots of abilities here that increases our cooldown rate, so you don't have to worry about anything being off cooldown for too long, especially Mantis Cannon. I'll show you guys right here. If you look down at the bottom right, we're actually firing our Mantis Cannon, and we're getting our charges really quickly. Although we are firing it, we are able to fire it there like, what, 7 times without having to really stop. Of course, we're firing 1 second intervals, but we're able to shoot a ton of charges there. It's absolutely insane. One of the key weapons we're using here for going all in on critical hit damage is the Trick Unforgiven. The reason why we're choosing Trick Unforgiven, as many people know, it gives us 432% critical hit damage as long as you get a 432% Unforgiven, which allows us to point at someone's head or critical spot in case it's not the head, but most of the time it's head, and just instantly deal all their health in one shot. And we're using a URAD as well, so we can get 150% more damage applied to that with our radiation damage. Now the other weapons we're using is the Backburner. Since we are running a URAD build, of course we're running a Deathless. Because we're running a Deathless, it's common to get into fight for your life when fighting a lot of enemies that are tougher because you get no health gauge. So we use a Backburner in case we're ever down. Since we're using certain points that increases our damage on weapon switch like Cold War, Backburner does crazy amounts of damage. And we're also running 1 point into Playing Dirty, so we have our projectiles firing twice, so we get 2 Backburner shots with 1 shot, which is absolutely crazy. Another great weapon we have here is the Sandhawk. As everyone knows, it's great. Every weapon we have here is URAD except for one particular gun. The Sandhawk's a great gun. You can pretty much kill anything with it, so we have that as well. Primarily, we like to keep the Unforgiven out until we go into fight for our life. Otherwise, you might want to try to melee someone or hope that your clone kills someone, but otherwise you want to switch to another weapon when you go into fight for your life. So Unforgiven out when you're not in fight for your life, everything else for fight for your life, except for one other weapon here. We have the Masterwork Crossbow. I have a build that optimizes Masterwork Crossbow a lot better than this build, but the Masterwork Crossbow is just a lot of fun. We're able to deal like millions of damage. I was able to deal 30 million damage easily on headshot with this guy without optimizing its damage output, just because it's really easy to hit headshots with this build because we're also running a Frozen Heart. Now the reason why we're running a Frozen Heart is because it instantly freezes anybody on its cryo, which is absolutely bonkers. We run an action skill start, activate any effects that trigger on shield break or fill. That means pretty much like every other second, since this build optimizes cooldown rate and firing your Mantis Cannon as much as possible, you're pretty much able to get this effect off like constantly. You're able to freeze everybody, and because they're frozen, you're easily able to get a good shot on their critical spot. So you'll oftentimes freeze someone, and then you'll take your time, aim at the person, and bam, all their health is gone because you have the Trick Unforgiven and a bunch of other critical multipliers that increases your damage to crazy amounts. Funnily enough, the cryo actually deals considerable amount of damage with the URAD bonus and every other bonus we have here. Sometimes I'll be firing my Mantis Cannon and kill the enemy without the Mantis Cannon even touching him because the cryo just did a bunch of damage. And since we're using a URAD, of course we have to run a Atom Bomb Deathless. Now an Atom Bomb Deathless is the go-to artifact for this build because not only does the Deathless allow us to proc URAD, it also allows us to have crazy amounts of radiation explosions. So if one enemy dies from a radiation damage, which is going to be always, no matter if it's cryo or the Mantis, you'll see that the radiation explosion explodes really huge, and then that kills an enemy, and then it just creates a giant chain of explosions. It's really fun. So of course we gotta have an Atom Bomb Deathless. The only other piece of gear that you should worry about on this build is your grenade. I was thinking what would be the best way to get our grenades out as much as possible. Now I went to Clone because Clone has a kill skill that allows Clone to throw out grenades whenever you get a kill skill. And since we're using Zane Red and Mantis Cannon, we're able to shoot really often, activate kill skills very often, and the clone will just throw out lots of grenades. And since the clone is out, we have action skills active, so we get grenade damage increased by 150%. And the Hunter Seeker has been buffed recently, and it just does crazy amounts of damage now. We're able to deal lots and lots of damage very easily with this. And for the enemies that are trickier to hit, like Rax, the Hunter Seeker does a great job at just flying up and hitting those enemies, so it's very easy. So that's why we're running the Hunter Seeker. Of course, you can use other grenades, but I found the Hunter Seeker to be the most brain-dead ability to use with this build. Hunter Seeker does a pretty good job at hitting critical hits. Now the main strat with this build I might have briefly talked about earlier is pretty much keeping your Unforgiven out and shooting your Mantis Cannon as much as possible to proc as many freezes. You'll often see running across enemies, hitting the cannon once you kill the enemy that you're pointing at, and then every enemy around you, because the cryo is frozen and at half health because we had the URAD bonus. We have basically have all our chips in on damage. If you're not killing the enemy, you will probably get down with this build. I'll tell you that. Do a really good job at killing enemies with this build, so you don't have to worry about going down too often. And especially if you like which one is real. So I personally use that so our survivability increases as well. Now of course you can use any weapon you want with this build. Of course you could always try another anointment, but I found that the URAD anointment allows us to optimize our Mantis damage by the most amount. That's why we're running an Unforgiven and using URAD as our primary go-to weapon. Of course you can always run a URAD of any other weapon you want. It doesn't really matter. It's any weapon that's meta you can use, go for it. Now the modifiers we use is Big Kick Energy, Healing Avenger, Pool Party, and Postmortem. Those are basic modifiers we use on like every build. There isn't any modifier that increases Mantis's damage. We kind of just go for whatever is least annoying. Now I rambled on long enough, let's get to the skill tree, the meat and potato of this build. The best parts of the purple tree mentioned earlier was Handsman Hand, Commitment, and Sheer Will. This is a filler skill, and this ability allows us to increase our gun damage. Very useful. It only modifies first shot you shoot, so it's primarily good for like shotguns, but I primarily use that for either one-shotting people with the Unforgiven or the Masterwork Crossbow. That's kind of almost a filler skill for this particular setup. And then we have the Eraser. Piercing shots have always been like with games. I feel like this is a really great ability if you can get it to hit. Now oftentimes you won't. Most enemies don't line up in a single orderly line. Of course you can use singularities to make this easier, but this is kind of just a filler point or just in case a situation arises. We don't get this particular ability. This particular setup focuses on the Unforgiven. Since we're using Unforgiven most of the time, we don't really need to boost Unforgiven's damage too much, and it doesn't have any status effects, so we kind of just ignore that. Now with Blue Tree, we went all the way down to Good Misfortune. I had an extra skill point, so that's why we have 1 point in there, but primarily what you're looking for is to get down to Seeing Red. You could of course go down to Death That Follows Close, but I feel like we need the other action skill points to do the other trees. So primarily we're using Violent Speed, Cold Bore, and Violent Momentum. That increases our damage by exponential amounts very passively, so those are very important. We have Cool Hands that increases our reload speed. With this particular build you want to reload a lot because we are running also Duct Tape mod, so you want to use the first shot of your magazine to get as many Hunter Seekers out there as possible. We have 1 point in Salvation. Originally I created this build without the Deathless, so this was useful, and rule of thumb with this ability, only get 1 point because we deal millions of damage at endgame, so you never need more than 1 point. But since we're running a Deathless, this is kind of a dead skill. We don't actually need that, so I would use the point on something else. And then Seeing Red, of course, to apply our kill skills every time we activate Mantis, and as you guys know, that's very often. 1 point in Playing Dirty because Seeing Red activates the ability like that with one Mantis, so you get additional shots, which is very useful when we're optimizing one shot, one kill builds like Unforgiven and Masterwork Crossbow. Now let's move on to this particular tree. Since we don't have a lot of points to freely use in this particular tree, in the perfect world, of course, I would want double barreled. But I can't do that because there's too many points we need in the other tree. So primarily go for this to increase our gun damage but when clones out, this to increase our gun damage when kill skill, which is, you know, all the time. We have Fractal Frags, which allows our clone to throw out tons and tons of Hunter Seekers because we're constantly triggering kill skills. So you'll see Hunter Seekers flying across the map. It's very, very useful. And the Duct Tape mod, so we just have another chance of throwing out Hunter Seeker. When I first got this ability, I had thought that we'd be seeing a lot of grenades, but the 20% chance is not a lot. I've noticed I had to shoot a lot with the first magazine to even see a grenade come out. So this is not a be-all, end-all best ability, but it's still useful to have the random Hunter Seekers come out, so that's still very useful. And then we have Quick Breather. Now, since we're primarily focusing on shields, this allows us to regen our shields very, very quickly. We need as much shield as possible to stay alive. And then we have this, which increases our shield every single time the clone takes damage, so we just get a ton of shields back very, very quickly. As I said before, you are very squishy with this build, so you want which one's real, which allows the clone to basically grab aggro from all the enemies and make it so you actually can survive. It only lasts for 4 seconds, so if you want to optimize it, you want to switch a lot of times with clone, but oftentimes I kind of just summon him and then don't swap with him because I want him to kind of be as far away as possible. And it's kind of hard to play that long game when you're doing swapping constantly. The reason why I want to be far away as possible because Hunter Seeker is optimized when you actually are far away because you want the Hunter Seeker to be shooting as much as possible. You want him to be as far away as possible. Other Mayhem modifiers you could probably use is Galaxy Brain. Galaxy Brain would probably help you a lot to increase the amount of critical hits you get. You really want to optimize your critical hit game. So I personally would recommend getting that instead of Big Kick Energy. But otherwise, since we're freezing enemies left and right by activating your action skills very, very quickly, we don't actually have a problem hitting the critical hit spot. It just helps you are out and about trying to be fast and kill the enemies. Real quick run by the action skill tree again for anybody who didn't catch it. We go almost a capstone on purple, almost a capstone on blue, and mid capstone on red, and nothing on green. If you guys want to see any of my other builds, we have a build that optimizes Mo's new skill tree, Iron Cub. Since Iron Cub can't deal a lot of damage, we use that build to optimize Mo's damage herself by using Flare and a bunch of other modifiers. If you're interested in that, check that out up there. If you're interested in more Zane builds, we have a build that optimizes on Crossbow and dealing tons of damage with that. We did 1.5 billion damage in one shot with that on Graveboard, which is absolutely bonkers. If you guys have a spare gas call lying around after the Halloween event, I have a Peregrine plus gas call build that is absolutely wrecks everything. Skulls just spawn like almost infinitely. Crazy amounts of skulls, crazy amounts of grenade damage if you're looking for a grenade damage focused build. Speaking of grenades, we also have a Peregrine plus light speed grenade build. We're able to solo the Malawan and Guardian takedown without firing a single bullet with that build. It's absolutely crazy and highly recommend that one. And then we also have a Zane melee focused build that optimizes using the Hustler class mod. It's not actually useless. You can use it to instant freeze any enemy you want. And since you're freezing enemies, you're able to get a bunch of damage multipliers from your face puncher. Do any type of content with that. It's very, very fun, and you never die because you're using a knife drain artifact as well. If anybody's interested, there is a save file down below. Just click down there. They'll be in the comments and description if you guys want to try this build out. And that's all I have for today. I hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye now.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him out with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. More in a cave with a torch on a wall than a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.